Welcome back to Bookish Dives. If you've joined us before, you know we love to really roll up our sleeves and dig into some impactful books.
Yeah, we've had some great explorations.
We really have. And
Mhm.
today we're tackling a book that aims to be something like a roadmap for a more meaningful existence.
That's right. Today, we're diving deep into Start with Values: How to Build a Life with Meaning and Purpose by Bradley Hook.
Hmm.
And our goal really is to unpack his core ideas, pull out those insights that, can really resonate and hopefully be useful for you listening.
Okay, so let's get into it then. Right off the bat, Hook takes us back to his early days in South Africa. And you can really see how those formative experiences shaped his thinking about values later on. He talks about his family observing like the inequalities of race and power.
Right.
And you get this sense of how moments like his strong reaction to abuse of power became seeds for his later work.
It's really interesting how he connects those childhood observations, the family tensions versus his grandfather's generosity. It paints this vivid picture of values, in action or maybe their absence. And you also get a sense that the resilience he saw, maybe in his parents, contributed to his understanding of that inner strength.
Which is so tied to living by your values.
Exactly.
And he's quite open about sharing some pretty significant personal turning points too, isn't he? Like the serious car accident?
Yeah, and the motorcycle accident later.
Right. You can imagine those kinds of events really force you to stop and reconsider what truly matters.
Oh, absolutely. Those experiences often bring this profound clarity, don't they? A sense of gratitude for life, maybe a desire to live more deliberately.
Hmm.
And when you combine that with his career path, I mean, from security, business, entrepreneurship,
It's quite diverse.
it is. You see this underlying drive, this curiosity to understand what gives life real substance. And it all kind of leads to his central idea
Hmm.
that our values aren't just fleeting preferences. They're
Right.
fundamental, almost existing beyond our physical selves in a way.
Okay, so that begs the question then. In Hook's view, what exactly are values? How does he define them?
Well, he describes them as our internal compass, that reliable guide helping us navigate a world that's constantly changing, often unpredictable.
An internal compass. I like that.
Yeah. And he uses this really helpful analogy of a GPS. Think about it, a GPS, it doesn't just find the quickest route,
Yeah,
right?
you can tell it things like avoid highways or
Exactly. Avoid tolls, take scenic routes. Our values, he argues, do the same for our lives. They guide us toward what we truly care about: family, career, philanthropy, whatever it is for you.
Okay, so that like our personalized life navigation system makes sense, but why are they so crucial? It feels like it's more than just a nice feeling when our choices line up.
It absolutely is. Hook really digs into the psychological benefits. He touches on Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Autonomy, competence, relatedness.
That's the one. And living by your values directly supports those core needs, which is why, studies show this link between aligning with your values and having a higher quality of life, less stress, greater happiness overall.
That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? When your actions reflect what you deeply believe in, there's this inherent sense of, like, wholeness.
Precisely. And the flip side, Hook explains, is that mismatch. When our actions and core values are out of sync, it creates this persistent, low-level stress.
Like a background hum of conflict.
Kind of, yeah. Like a program running in the background signaling something's wrong. And it's not just a feeling. He suggests it can have actual physical consequences: inflammation, weakened immunity, maybe even increasing risks for mental health issues.
Wow.
But on the positive side, he points out how having clear core values, like, say, honesty or compassion, can actually simplify decision-making.
How so?
Well, when you know what you stand for, those difficult choices become a little less murky, the path becomes clearer.
He even brings in that classic Steve Jobs quote, doesn't he?
Oh.
About connecting the dots looking backward.
He does, which really emphasizes how living with that internal direction, our values, often makes sense only in hindsight. It's like trusting that inner voice, even when the path ahead isn't crystal clear.
Trusting the compass.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of that internal guide, even when things feel uncertain. So, okay, we've established what values are, why they matter. The next big question is, how do we actually figure out what our values are?
Right, the practical part. And this is where the book starts offering some tools, frameworks.
Yeah, he introduces this idea of using models, acknowledging their simplifications, of course, but helpful for boosting self-awareness. He mentions Maslow's hierarchy briefly, even some critiques of it.
But his main model is the values pyramid, right?
That's the one I found particularly insightful, yeah. He presents it as a way to understand how different types of values interact and how our focus might shift depending on our circumstances.
Okay, break it down for us. What are the layers?
So think of a pyramid. At the very base, you have survival. Then moving up, there's belonging, then growth, then impact, and right at the top, fulfillment.
Okay, survival, belonging, growth, impact, fulfillment. And each layer has specific kinds of values.
Exactly. Survival is the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Security, food, shelter, financial stability, the essentials.
Got it.
Belonging includes things like love, family, friendships, respect, fairness, even community and sustainability.
Makes sense.
Growth is about learning, education, knowledge, our physical and mental well-being, achievement, feeling competent.
Okay.
Impact involves things like status, influence, autonomy, work-life balance, wealth, material success. And then fulfillment, at the peak, is about meaning, gratitude, connection to something bigger, spirituality, stewardship, supporting others.
Wow, that covers a lot.
It does. And he makes a really crucial point. If those foundational survival needs are threatened, well, they're naturally going to demand our attention first.
Of course. You can't really focus on, say, personal growth if you're worried about where your next meal is coming from.
Precisely. It explains why priorities shift so dramatically in a crisis.
And he also talks about these broader categories linked to the pyramid. Survive, engage, and thrive. How do those fit?
Yeah, think of survive as basically that bottom survival layer. Engage covers the middle, belonging and growth, where we're actively participating, connecting, developing. And thrive represents the top two, impact and fulfillment, where we're hitting that deeper sense of purpose and contribution.
Okay, that clarifies the pyramid nicely. So how do we start pinpointing our own values within this? Where do we begin?
Hook offers several methods, which is great. One key way is just reflecting on what genuinely brings you fulfillment.
Like what makes you feel truly alive?
Exactly. Is it adventure, creativity, acts of service, learning, connection? He gives this relatable example of saving for a first home.
Right.
And how that might connect to a deeper value, like responsibility or security.
Okay. What else?
Another powerful technique is thinking about the values of people you really admire.
Oh, interesting. Like role models.
Yeah. He uses examples like Nelson Mandela, resilience, equality, leadership, or Malala Yousafzai, courage, education, women's rights. It's like holding up a mirror to what we ourselves hold in high esteem.
That's a really insightful way to approach it. Look outwards to understand inwards.
It really is. And the book also includes a pretty comprehensive values list categorized by those pyramid layers. That can be a fantastic springboard for just brainstorming.
So you start with a big list, maybe using his examples or thinking about people you admire.
Right. Then the next step is refining it, getting it down to your core values, maybe the top 5.
How do you do that? It seems hard to choose just 5.
He suggests asking some tough questions like, would you fiercely defend this value? Is it consistently reflected in your daily actions, how you actually live? And importantly, do you see it continuing to be important for your future self?
Those are good tests. He also introduces something called the intrinsic versus extrinsic value test. What's that about?
Yeah, that's crucial for understanding the real driving force behind a value. It involves asking yourself 4 key questions.
Okay. Where does the motivation come from? What truly brings fulfillment? How consistent is this value across different parts of your life? And does it depend on external validation, like what other people think?
So digging into the why behind the value.
Exactly. By answering those honestly, you get a clearer picture of whether it's driven by, say, internal satisfaction that's intrinsic or the need for external approval extrinsic.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. He uses physical fitness. It could be driven by the intrinsic value of feeling healthy and strong, feeling good in your body.
Right.
Or it can be driven by the extrinsic value of wanting to look a certain way to impress others or fit some societal mold. Big difference in the long run.
Definitely. And he also distinguishes between means values and end values.
Yes. He explains that those values, often in the survival layer, like financial security, often serve as the means to achieve something deeper, an end value.
So financial security might be a means to achieve freedom or peace of mind, which are the end values. Exactly. And he encourages us to focus more on those end values for lasting fulfillment while recognizing the necessity of the means.
Okay.
And another key point, values need to enable action. They can't just be abstract nouns sitting there.
What does he mean by that?
He introduces this idea of turning your values into kinetic verbs. So instead of just love, maybe think loving. Instead of creativity, think being creative.
Ah, making them active.
Precisely. It makes them more tangible, connects them to actual behaviors, even helps with goal setting, like using SMART goals.
So instead of just saying, I value learning,
Yeah.
you might think about actively seeking knowledge and then create habits around that.
You got it. He then gives some practical techniques for testing and prioritizing these values further. Things like asking the 5 whys to really get to the root cause or motivation behind a value.
The 5 whys of it.
Or value pairing, comparing 2 values side by side to see which one feels more essential to you. And also just engaging in regular, maybe daily reflection.
And for narrowing it down to, say, the top 3.
He outlines a structured process for that too. Involves deep reflection, assessing the potential impact and fulfillment each brings, checking for consistency, doing a direct comparison, ranking them, and then a final reflection.
Sounds quite thorough.
It is. He even suggests, kind of interestingly, using AI tools like ChatGPT as a brainstorming partner if you feel stuck just getting ideas out.
Ah, that's a very modern tip.
It is. And Hook makes this powerful point. When we define our values as core aspects of our identity, not just things we aspire to, it can actually create a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. It shifts from trying to be honest to I am an honest person. It changes how you see yourself and consequently how you act.
That's a subtle but powerful shift in mindset.
Absolutely. He then circles back briefly to that survival layer, acknowledges its fundamental importance, especially in tough times, but stresses that the real aim is to move beyond just survival towards those higher values for a richer future. He lists some clear examples of those survival-oriented values again.
Now, the book takes a bit of an interesting detour here, doesn't it? He touches on psychedelics and plant medicine.
He does, yeah. And it reflects, a growing area of interest and research. He talks about potential benefits, deepening self-awareness, maybe confronting past traumas, feeling more connected.
Connected to what?
To something larger, maybe. Collective consciousness, nature, spirituality. He mentions the stoned ape theory, even shares some personal anecdotes.
But he includes caveats, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's very careful to emphasize approaching this with caution. You need to consider your mindset, the setting, get experienced guidance, understand the legal status, be aware of the risks. It's not a recommendation, more an exploration of potential avenues for introspection for some people.
Okay, so a nuanced perspective, acknowledging potential but urging responsibility.
Exactly. Then he shifts gears to something probably more universally relatable, what he calls junk values.
Junk values, like junk food.
Kind of. These are the values often pushed by, say, social media or consumer culture. Relentless materialism, chasing fame, superficial beauty standards.
Ah, the extrinsic stuff we talked about earlier.
Pretty much. Hook cautions against these because they often don't provide that deep, lasting satisfaction that intrinsic values do. They can lead to this cycle of craving more and feeling disconnected.
He mentions Johann Hari's lost connections here.
Yeah, to illustrate that point about disconnection. And he makes another interesting observation. Feeling regret can often be a strong signal that we've somehow violated one of our own genuine underlying values.
That's a useful way to think about regret as feedback.
It is. And it's interesting how he also points out that values can be this double-edged sword. They can unite people, but they can also divide them. He uses examples like Napoleon and Fidel Castro.
How so?
To show how even seemingly positive values like loyalty or national pride can be interpreted and acted upon in vastly different, sometimes destructive ways, depending on the person and context. It highlights the personal, sometimes complex nature of it all.
Right. So discovering values is one thing.
Yeah.
But the next crucial step is actually living them day to day.
Exactly. And this is where he introduces the power of micro habits, those tiny incremental actions.
Ah, yes, making change manageable.
Precisely. He really champions micro habits as a way to create significant behavioral shifts over the long haul. He references James Clear's Atomic Habits, B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits.
Familiar names in that space.
Right. The idea is that these small, almost effortless actions bypass our natural resistance to change. They reduce fear, reduce effort, and help build consistency almost without you noticing.
That 1% better every day philosophy, he uses that math, doesn't he? How tiny improvements compound.
Yeah, that compelling illustration, 1% better each day, leads to being, 37 times better over a year? It's a powerful reminder that huge change doesn't always need huge initial steps.
So how do you actually set these values-based micro-habits?
He gives a really clear step-by-step guide. First, pick a core value you want to focus on.
Okay.
Then start really small, like incredibly small. If your value is learning, maybe the habit is read one sentence.
One sentence. Seriously?
Seriously. Make it too easy not to do. Then anchor that micro habit to an existing routine, like after you brush your teeth. Make it attractive, easy, satisfying. Track your progress, reflect. Gradually scale up only when it feels effortless. Keep checking it aligns with the value. And maybe even tell someone to add accountability.
That sounds very doable, actually. Start tiny, link it, track it, grow it.
Exactly. He also addresses something important, how stress can cloud our values, how it pushes us into survival mode.
Right, you mentioned that earlier with the survival layer.
He elaborates here, describes the neurophysiology, the amygdala, hypothalamus, adrenaline, cortisol kicking in, essential for acute danger, like that zebra escaping a lion, but really damaging when it becomes chronic stress from, say, just ruminating about work or finances. He contrasts the zebra's quick recovery with how humans often get stuck in that stress loop.
And that chronic stress blocks access to our higher values.
Pretty much. It keeps us focused on immediate perceived threats. So the key takeaway is the importance of actively cultivating calm, creating the mental space to access and act from our deeper values.
And he offers practical tools for that.
Yes, a whole toolkit. Mindfulness meditation, specific breathing techniques like tactical calm, progressive muscle relaxation like yoga nidra, grounding techniques, that 5-4-3-2-1 method is great.
Yeah, naming things you can see, hear, feel.
Exactly. Also visualization, avoiding stimulants like too much caffeine, and just regular physical activity, all concrete strategies.
Okay, so manage stress to access values. Makes sense.
And he shares this really compelling example of values-based action with Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman and the Gift of the Givers Foundation.
Oh, the disaster relief organization.
That's them, just illustrating the profound impact possible when actions stem directly from deeply held values like compassion and service. He also warns about the pitfalls of people-pleasing.
Letting others' expectations override your own values.
Right, which can lead you way off your own path. So he outlines a clear process for making values-based decisions.
What are the steps?
First, define the situation clearly. Then, identify which of your core values are most relevant here. Brainstorm options. Evaluate each option against your values. Check in emotionally, consider practicalities, make the decision. And importantly, reflect afterward on how it felt, what you learned.
That seems like a solid framework for tough choices. He includes a meditation, too.
Yeah, a simple guided mindfulness practice right there in the book, which is helpful.
Moving beyond individual decisions, he looks at values in rituals and rites of passage.
Right. He talks about rites of passage, graduation, marriage, new job, retirement, as ceremonies marking transformations, which often reflect shifts in our values.
Yeah.
And that leads to values-based rituals. These are regular practices supported by those micro habits we talked about that reaffirm our values. They can reduce anxiety, enhance performance. He mentions Colonel McRaven's make your bed idea.
As a ritual of discipline and starting the day right?
Exactly. A simple act reinforcing a value. He gives tons of examples for different values. Gratitude journals, family dinners without devices, community volunteering, quiet time for peace, nature walks for stewardship, setting aside time for creativity, specific ways to show respect or generosity or integrity, planning adventures.
Wow, lots of ideas there.
Yeah.
How do you create your own?
He suggests identify the value, reflect on its meaning for you, make the ritual practical and consistent, and maybe even share it. It's about intentionally building reminders of what matters into your life.
This ties into shaping your environment too, right?
Definitely. Considering the underlying values of spaces, like the difference between a library and a nightclub, he touches on neuroaesthetics, how design impacts us, and the power of music and sound.
Using music to evoke certain states.
Yeah, how different music can influence emotions, even brainwaves. He connects sound to values, suggesting musical styles for creativity, focus, joy, calm, connection, motivation. Again, curating your environment.
Fascinating.
And he keeps circling back to the foundation. Personal well-being, sleep, movement, diet, breath. These aren't separate. They're essential for having the energy and resilience to live your values. He offers a simple wellness guide, morning routine ideas.
It all connects.
It really does. He also revisits visualization, using Michael Phelps as an example of mentally rehearsing success, connecting it back to visualizing values-driven actions to help prioritize them.
But then there's that important warning about extreme values alignment.
Yes, the Genghis Khan example. It's a caution that even positive values, like loyalty or efficiency, if taken to an extreme without balance or consideration for other values, can lead to negative consequences. Balance is key.
A very important point. So we've discovered our values, started living them. Now, how do we communicate them?
Crucial step. He starts with that great example of Reagan and Gorbachev in Geneva.
How did that relate to values?
It showed how finding common ground, even on a basic human values level, can build bridges despite massive political divides. It underscores the power of connecting through shared values.
So how do we articulate our own values clearly?
He gives a process. Define the value in your own words. Provide context or examples. Test the statement. Is it clear? Is it authentic? He gives concrete examples for translating values like integrity, empathy, curiosity, responsibility into communicable statements.
Okay, that's helpful for expressing ourselves. But what about understanding others' values? That seems key for relationships.
Absolutely. He offers techniques for that too. Asking open-ended questions is a big one. What does success look like to you? Or what are you most proud of?
Not just yes/no questions.
Right. Using the 5 whys again, but about their motivations. Observing their actions over time, actions often speak louder than words. Active listening, really listening, sometimes asking direct but tactful questions, analyzing their choices, leveraging shared experiences to see what matters to them.
Lots of ways to tune in. And navigating difficult conversations where values clash.
He provides guidance there too. Preparation is key. Reflect on your own values and goals for the conversation. Try to go in open-minded. Articulate your values specifically, avoiding blame, using I statements. Ask open-ended questions to understand their perspective, actively listen, show empathy, summarize to ensure understanding, look for common ground, even small areas of agreement, and know when to agree to disagree respectfully. Then close constructively, maybe with action steps if needed.
That sounds like a roadmap for healthier conflict.
It really is. Finally, the book broadens the scope to collective values, how they operate in groups.
Friendships, families, workplaces.
Exactly. He talks about identifying shared values in friendships and partnerships through open discussion, maybe even creating a relationship values statement.
Value statement for a couple.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and for families too. Seeing family values as a guide for stability and coherence, he gives steps for crafting them. Individual reflection, family discussion, defining and articulating them, and then consciously living them, modeling the behavior.
And workplace values. That's a big one. They can feel so corporate sometimes.
He acknowledges that. He highlights the potential impact studies linking strong values to revenue growth, employee engagement, resilience. But he also addresses why they often become just buzzwords on a wall.
So how do you make them real?
He suggests genuine introspection, strong leadership involvement and modeling, integrating values into actual daily decisions and processes, storytelling to bring values to life, and maybe even co-creating or refreshing them with employees. Aiming for a spread across that values pyramid, not just focusing on, say, impact values. He mentions NVIDIA, Accenture, Google as examples.
So it takes conscious effort to keep them alive.
Definitely. He also touches briefly on the value of diversity of values within a society for balance and adaptation, and the critical importance of nature stewardship, caring for the environment for both individual well-being and our collective future. He references the 7 generations concept.
A powerful indigenous idea.
Very much so. He kind of brings it all together at the end by reflecting on Nelson Mandela, again, his values, their impact, reiterating that the power to transform the world really starts within each of us, with our internal compass.
And he leaves us with those 2 guiding questions for future decisions.
Right. Will I regret this action or inaction? And will this bring me fulfillment? Powerful prompts.
It's a really thought-provoking framework to end on, encouraging us to take ownership and live with intention.
Absolutely. A deep journey into understanding and living our values.
This has been, well, a truly deep and insightful dive into Start With Values. Really appreciate you breaking it down like that.
My pleasure. It's a valuable book.
It really seems like it. So if you listening found this summary helpful and you want to explore more impactful books with us, be sure to follow Bookish Dives. We'll be back with more in-depth summaries soon.